It's been roughly a year and a half since industry events went virtual. Now, as we return to in-person events, we ask our panel of female tech leaders to reflect on what worked and what didn't work, since networking became a socially distant activity.
That's a connection that's going to stay, right? Can't get that in a Zoom meeting.
And later, we'll hear from two industry experts about what it was like to plan their first in-person event since the pandemic began.
One attendee actually stopped me in the hallway and he said for the first time in 18 months, he had someone else to talk to outside of his company to really bounce ideas off of.
Hello, and welcome to Get Witty with It, Women Talk Tech, a podcast designed for women in the IT channel. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso. A lot has changed in the past 18 months when it comes to how we network and do business. For the most part, everything has gone virtual, including industry events, which often give channel members the ability to connect with several peers and industry colleagues at once. That's finally starting to change, but will it be different compared to what we remember from before the pandemic? We'll discuss that today. But first, let's meet our guest panel. We've got Nancy Sabino, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Cinetech Solutions, and Sandra Batakis, Founder and CEO of Sandra Network. Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited for you to be here with me today. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Katie. Thanks for having us.
So happy to have you both. Before we go into our subjects, our questions today, let me kind of drive home a little bit of an introduction of what we're going to be talking about. As I said before, the ability to host in-person industry events has become possible again recently. And in fact, the channel company, our parent company, hosted their first in-person event since March 2020 in mid-August. It's called XChange, for those of you who haven't heard of it or been to it. And what I want to do today is look back at the past year of virtual events and virtual networking and talk about what we learned and how it will impact the future of events. So first, I want to bring in a little bit of study. A survey by Blind, an anonymous professional network with more than 3 million users, stated 75% of respondents said they had not been able to network outside of their companies since remote work began. And plus, research from Harvard Business Review says our professional and personal networks have shrunk by nearly 16% during the pandemic. So my first question in this is, did you find networking over the last year, over the pandemic, to be more, less, or equally as difficult than before 2020? And why or why not?
So I have to say, I really missed out on the personal interactions. When I went to the XChange event just recently, and it was such an awesome reunion. It really felt like seeing old friends that we hadn't seen in so long. And some of those friends are actually in a peer group with me that we have tried to continue virtually. So even seeing them, even though I see them on a regular basis virtually, seeing them in person, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. And it was an incredible reunion and something that is not replaceable in a virtual way.
Sandra, how about you? Has this been something easy, hard, the same? What do you think?
Oh, it's 100% more challenging. And when you do pandemic-based networking and you're in a Zoom with 30 people, everyone's chattering, no one's listening. And, if I was to see Nancy in a big Zoom with 30 of us networking, even if she and I wanted to talk, we wouldn't be able to talk over them, right? So in a regular event, we can just stand off to the side and have that conversation. So you really miss all of that. There's too much chatter. I just kind of sit and listen and, like watching a bad ping pong game. The breakout rooms are great, and they're doing their best where you're suddenly thrown in a room to network one-on-one with someone, like a speed networking. But that can be awkward, right? You're in a little breakout room with someone you have nothing in common with, and you're just watching the clock. Or you can be uber rude and just hit end and just leave them hanging. Like, was it something I said? So, there are just so many little nuances that you have to kind of work through. And you see someone in a giant virtual one, and I don't know, it's just everything's lost, or you're scrolling through pages. So I hated it, actually.
Just up front, telling the people the truth about how you
Yeah.
feel.
I do like Zoom calls with one-on-one if I need to talk to someone, but other than that, I think the networking is, 100% effort, and it's just not going to work for me.
I think something that really stuck out to me was a story that you actually told us right before coming on the recording, Sandra, where you had like an accidental networking experience. Do you want to give us the Reader's Digest of what happened when you were just at Exchange, and tell me how
Yeah.
that compared to the virtual experience?
And it's going to result in business, which is the best part, and friendship. 2 years ago at Exchange, I meet someone named Corey. We get along great. We talk some business stuff. We, of course, are out on an Exchange, networking event, probably drinking too much or out too late, and just really had a solid thing. We've stayed in touch. We've done some business proposals, but I haven't actually seen him in person in 2 years, and he wasn't going to make Exchange. So as I am standing with a group at the evening networking reception, I turn around and I see him coming towards me, and got the name badge. His name is Corey. It's 100% Corey, right? Looks exactly same body, same hair, same beard, same everything. I grabbed him and gave him the biggest bear hug and told him how happy I was to see him. And the long and the short of it was, wrong Corey. Both of them named Corey. Both of them are bald. Both of them have giant beards, same height, and both named Corey. So what are the chances, right? It took me about an hour to figure out it was a different Corey. But that led for a lot of jokes. And I spent the next two to 3 days with him and his colleagues, and we went out to dinner, and we have a call actually in 2 days where there might be some mutual business that we can get done. And a friendship. We had a blast, but you can't do that on a virtual networking.
You can't
Not
hug
that I want to
strangers.
embarrass myself more than once like that, because it was a little horrifying when I realized.
But it worked out, and that's the experience you get when you go to the in-person events.
Yep. So yes, very comical, but that's a connection that's going to stay, right? Can't get that in a Zoom meeting.
Well, I think that's really important to point out what we missed and what certainly was just not going to work compared to virtual events. But I have to ask, is there anything from the virtual events or networking experiences that you've attended in the past year that worked? Would you like to see anything, I guess, continue, or is there a place in this world for anything that you saw during those experiences?
I don't have the solution to this, but the one thing that I did love and hate were breakout sessions. In a large networking session, you can get pulled in a bunch of directions, and sometimes it's nice to be, I don't want to call it force mixed. Like, I like conventions where they change where you sit every time you come in, because now you're forced to sit with someone new and to get that opportunity. And it could be kind of like a breakout session, but it'd be neat if we could figure out how to incorporate activities like that into a larger networking.
I think it would be really cool if you could, if you were in a virtual event, and if you could kind of impromptu get a breakout session of your own. Like, if you can select somebody and say, hey, let's meet in this breakout room so that we can chat really quick. That kind of thing would be great. So Zoom, if you're listening,
Yeah, exactly.
Here's an idea. But I think when it comes to the virtual events, one thing that I did enjoy was being able to, the convenience of it. It was absolutely fantastic. I'm a mom of 2 kids, and so being able to attend an event without having to leave home, it was fantastic. But at the same time, I also realized that it doesn't give you the same. I mean, you could also get so easily distracted. And so it was definitely not the same experience, but I liked the convenience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important to point out, especially Nancy, as you said, you're a mom, you've got 2 young kids. So when you could put them down for a nap and go crush a virtual event real fast, it's got to be super convenient for you to be able to just say, I did this today. I had those opportunities. But there is, like you were saying, Sandra, the lack of that ability just to go up to random people and be able to start those conversations. And I think we all miss the the 11:30 p.m., like we're at the hotel bar, just meeting people, and you're finally out of things are loosened up out of the element.
Mhm.
I don't know how many wine nights over virtual conferences really feel the same way, even though some people have tried to set those up. So let's talk about, the lack of in-person business interaction. When that happened, did that impact you business wise, not being able to have that in-person interaction? And can you give me an idea of what exactly that impact was on your businesses?
I mean, we actually grew last year. So over the pandemic, we went up about 25, 30%. I mean, we're IT, people need us. And it was kind of an interesting experience for me because things were quieter, but they were busier. But I had time to really look at all my processes in the office, how we were running things, how we were, where are inefficiencies, how can we now do this on a distributed basis, how can we track these things? And I got a chance to look at, everything. And in the course of the last year and a half, I've migrated a number of my systems to different platforms that, I'll just use quoting as an example. My quote system, for me to produce a bad looking quote could have been hours. Now I do it in under 3 minutes. And, it brings it through procurement and there's nothing lost. And, all the checklists are there. And so I did a lot of things like that and came out ahead, and now God knows what this year is going to bring, right? But thanks, Delta. So as a business, I mean, it was stressful, but it was successful. Knock on wood.
Nancy, how about for you?
Well, for me, I have a funny story, I guess, and it does start with networking, ultimately speaking.
Was his name Corey?
No, not Corey. But essentially, several years ago, I met someone through, I guess, through a podcast, ultimately speaking, who then introduced me to the XChange events where we first met in person. He became a mentor of mine. And this year, we were actually acquired by him and his company. So that is a huge story in terms of how my business did. We were acquired this year. So yeah, and it started off with networking. And if that wasn't a possibility, then I wouldn't be here in the position that I am today. So that's how I feel about it.
And that's interesting because that was essentially a virtual networking, meeting somebody through a podcast.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It is. Yes, that's how we met. I was a listener of the podcast, and I finally reached out and was like, hey, this is very interesting, and what do y'all think about this? And they invited me onto the podcast. Friendship started there, and we met in person finally at an XChange event. And then all that is history.
An interesting hybrid story to
Yes.
think about. And congratulations, by the way, everything sounds really exciting. All the changes happening for you. Congratulations to both of you, growth and being acquired and success constantly. So that's awesome. I do have to ask, because Sandra, you brought it up. You mentioned Delta. Obviously, we're still in the pandemic right now. Getting back at the in-person event that you both attended, how did you feel just getting there? I mean, was it weird at first? Was it kind of bizarre to suddenly be back there? Or did you feel like you just fell right back into that routine?
I felt 100% fine going in, boardroom's fine, everything's fine. And then we were at the evening networking where actually I met Nancy, and I think it was in the middle of one of my hot flashes because we got that right. But all of a sudden there were just too many people. Like there was too much, the humidity of what I mean, when you get
You
all
feel the breath
in the room and you feel the breath, right? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can't be here. Like, oh my God, there's too many. There's, so you start getting that pandemic anxiety, because maybe different than a boardroom, you could kind of, and an hour later I was fine. So it was very, very up and down for me, just trying to, am I making a mistake? Oh, this is fine. Am I making a mistake? So that's how I felt.
How about for you, Nancy?
very similar. I found myself trying to find a corner away from people more often than not, or trying to go to a different room. It was fine during the boardrooms. The boardrooms, we had enough distance away from each other, I feel, that, you know, even without a mask, it felt fine, especially being vaccinated. But it was the moments where the crowd was too much, and I had to tell myself, okay, is it my social anxiety, or is it the pandemic? What is it? But I'm trying to get away from people at the moment. But you know, then I would come back and it would be fine.
It seems like an emotional roller coaster thinking about that. I'm sure that was probably eking its way into your thoughts every once in a while, and you had to be like, how do I address this? Just knowing that this is likely going to be something that we further face as the year continues. And hopefully when 2022 comes around, we don't even remember the word coronavirus or COVID or any of that. But knowing that this could be something we have to think about, what would you do differently at the next event, or what would you hope to kind of do to just break that up so that you wouldn't even have to think about, oh, do I need to make a personal, responsible decision right now?
I don't have any ideas. You know, if you had broke us into smaller groups and put all these restrictions on us, it wouldn't have been the same, you know? So I don't know how that could have been better. But, you know, in the big, you know, dining halls, networking event where we're all in the same room. And again, the room is warm because of the people. Maybe that was the big, like, oh, we are bringing the same air. But I really don't know that you could break that up and say, okay, we can only have 10 people per room, or, you know, walk around with 6-foot sticks. I mean, I'm not sure. I think it's an all or nothing. I think you can say I'm vaccinated and I'm happy and I'm going in, or not. I don't know. But you know, that also is a piece of stress for me, because as you're getting this close to people you don't know, you know, you want to blurt out, are you vaccinated? Right? But that can lead into a whole other stressful conversation. It's the same conversation if you don't talk politics, right? So you meet someone, nice to meet you, you know, what do you do? What do you do? Are you vaccinated? Like, that totally changes the course in some instances of a conversation.
I personally loved the sticker system that was
Yes.
used, as far as the comfortability and closeness and that kind of thing. Maybe the stickers need to be a little bit bigger, more prominent. I don't know.
A lanyard of a traffic
lanyard,
light on
yes,
front of you.
exactly. A lanyard with a certain color or something that kind of speaks to it a little bit more, because I know when I saw certain people that I had been waiting to see, it was an immediate like attack with a hug, and then I reacted like, oh my God, what color are you? Just completely forgetting about that. But I think maybe that's something to think about. But I don't know what other changes could be done.
I'm 100% with you, because, you know, I'd rush in someone you're excited to see and shake their hand. All of a sudden you would see yellow or red. You'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's okay. It's you. Okay.
Yeah. I am vaccinated though. No. You know, it's like, I'm gonna confirm that.
I'm a card carrying member.
Okay.
Literally. I absolutely agree that it's something where we may not know how to approach it, and ideas might need to just be thrown up over time to see how we can do it. And like I said, there's always those personal responsible decisions of what to make, but it sounds like both of you felt very comfortable with some of the ways that some of the roadblocks, or I guess you should say speed bumps, ways to check yourselves as you went along there that were created. So as we wrap up here, ladies, really what I want to know is, as we move forward, how do you think you're going to approach networking, knowing that you've had those virtual experiences over the last year? You've been able to identify what you like, what you don't like. Do you think it's going to go back to exactly the way we were doing it before the pandemic? Or was there anything you learned that you said, I need to keep that in mind, or I need to make sure I attend these particular virtual events because they were really good for me? Anything at all that comes to mind about how you'll change or not change your behavior?
I think for me, it will be probably a mixture of live events and virtual events. That the fact that they're convenient, for sure, that adds to it. That means that I can pick and choose a little bit more closely as to where I travel. But beyond that, I think that remembering that you can use a Zoom call to meet with someone one-on-one that you've met in person to continue that relationship is something that I will continue to do going forward, because it does bring us a little bit closer together, and we are able to strengthen that relationship until we see each other live again.
I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. I love Zoom calls with people that I know, or friendships or relationships that I'm trying to strengthen. But I think there'll be a mix for me. It'll just be a careful mix. Before I would go to almost anything. I shouldn't say almost anything, but that's interesting, I'll pop in. And I think now that the event has to really be worth it. XChange, I was very excited about. It's worth it. So I'm going to take that leap, but I'm not going to take that leap as randomly as I used to.
I think the consideration and taking that control into your own hands, but also having the options now is going to be really important. So do I go to this event? Is that something that I'll ultimately need? Or could I do this virtually? Is there a virtual option? I think we'll be seeing a lot more choices like that as we go forward. But I appreciate both of you. And I think the last thing that I'd really love to know, if I can throw you a curveball, any advice for women out there who are just getting started in the channel or who are trying to expand into the channel as professionals, any advice for them? Because this is such a new frontier that we're still moving through. Is there anything that you learned in the past year that you would give to those who are just starting to get involved in channel work and networking that maybe they were just having a hard time with because there really was no roadmap out there ahead of this?
I just think that, you need to align yourself with people who are smarter than you are. I'd make a lousy accountant, so you hire an accountant, right? So the same thing goes with anything from IT to business processes. You've got to know who's good at what they're doing and go in that direction. We can't do it all. And if you align yourself and you listen to the advice, that's going to help you quite a bit. You don't want to listen to idle chatter. You really want to line yourself up with people who are going to keep you there and be one step ahead of you so that you've got some sort of path that you can take.
It's a very Michael Dell comment. Find people that are smarter than you in a room. That way you can learn from them. Nancy, how about you?
I would say take a chance. That's how you encounter Corey's. By
the way, I've not told Corey number 1 yet about Corey number 2.
Beyond that, you just never know who is going to change your life once you meet them. So you have to take that chance and be open to meeting new people. Like Sandra had said, I don't know if it was prior to the recording or during the recording, I can't remember now, but she said, like the events where you get to meet someone new at every different kind of category or whatever. And so, yeah, that is something that is so helpful because you never know who can add value to your career or to your life or who can change it. So yeah, take a chance.
I feel like you're either telling me how to get started in my professional life or how to meet the right guy, but either way, I think that information is perfect. Or girl, guy or girl.
It kind of works the same, right?
Sandra and
it's
Nancy.
all about relationships and people, so.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you both, Sandra and Nancy, for joining me today and talking. I've had such a good time, and thank you at home for listening, but we're actually going to just take a break. And coming up, we talk with professional event planners who just wrapped their first in-person event in more than a year to find out how it went and what they learned. Stay tuned. This episode of Get Witty With It is brought to you by Sandra Network, technology, support, and consulting for your IT needs. Welcome back to Get Witty With It. Earlier in the podcast, you heard me mention XChange, the first in-person event hosted by the channel company, our parent company, in more than a year. What I didn't say was that every other major event that TCC held during the pandemic before that had to be pivoted to a virtual format. And now I'm joined by two of the hardworking minds behind the events team at the channel company, Tracy Fisher, Senior Audience Director of Events, and Allison Cohen, Event Director. Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited to have you here today. Personally, I know that chatting with the two of you is like chatting with a couple of friends, so this should be fairly painless. What do you think?
Absolutely.
I have to ask, first of all, because we got such fantastic commentary from Nancy and Sandra, who I spoke to earlier. They loved XChange. So from your perspectives, putting it together, how was it?
We loved XChange.
It was fantastic. It really was. And to hear you say that, you spoke to a couple of the attendees, and they loved it as well. It's just in line with what we were hearing on site and then after the event as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And I couldn't be there, unfortunately. So I'm so excited. This will be my chance to get to know all the hot goss coming out of XChange and to learn what happened.
It'll be like you were there.
It'll be like I was there. The virtual in-person experience, something. We'll come up with a better term for that, but the catch-up, if you will. So I hear that XChange August 2021 got a higher attendee satisfaction score than previous events, and it even outscored some events from major names in the company and other companies, some competitors. So what contributed to this, and what feedback did you both receive?
Yeah, I honestly, I would say the biggest thing is that first, people were so excited to be back in person. I think that really definitely added to it. So the excitement level was definitely higher than normal. Also, the fact that we put all these things into place, the content. Allison did an amazing job lining up content that left people feeling warm and fuzzy coming back to an event for the first time. You have people actually being in person with each other and networking and getting new ideas. And one attendee actually stopped me in the hallway and he said for the first time in 18 months, he had someone else to talk to outside of his company to really bounce ideas off of. He goes, I finally felt like I was back with my community again. So I think all those things contributed to just an amazing score. The vendors brought their A game. It was amazing from top to bottom.
I think everybody was engaged from the second they landed there till the moment they left, from both sides, partners and the sponsors as well.
I have to ask, this is something where you pivoted one way and then you had to pivot back because we didn't know what was going to be happening from 2020 into 2021 and then into the summer. It was really nerve-wracking. Let's look back. What went into pivoting into a virtual event format, and how and why did that format change over time? I remember so often, so many comments just kind of fielding through our inner system saying, this worked really well, we need to adjust this. Let me in on that. I want to get inside of your brains for it.
Absolutely. So I first want to say it's working with an amazing team. That is first and foremost, who can pivot. I know that buzzword, but they truly pivoted from running live in-person events to full-blown virtual events. I think the team won, and our advisory board. So leaning on them, what is going to work for you to get you to show up? And then if they're going to show up, we'll get the support of the sponsors. So many different individuals, we put so many surveys out there into the field, and we really just wanted to produce a show that was going to be engaging on all sides.
Yep. And then we brought in from the other side of it is instead of it being just a virtual platform, we also brought in peer networking. We brought in as many components that happen at XChange or our live events as we could in some sort of virtual capacity. So we did small peer groups, we did peer networking, we asked fun icebreaker questions just to get everyone as engaged as possible. But a lot of it was just back end planning. It's like, okay, so that didn't work, when we tried doing little tiny regional things where it's just a small group of people safely spread out and then other people joining remotely, and it's like, okay, that didn't work so well, let's try something different.
Right, a lot of trial and error. That's a good point. And it's bringing our personalities into it, because even though we couldn't be face to face in person, you did feel like you were an XChange event. If you take XChange March, where that was fully virtual, we did feel like we came together, and we heard that from the attendees, like, oh, it felt good to kind of be back, but not,
Back in name, not necessarily in person.
True. Yeah.
So now let's look forward into what we just accomplished, the XChange in-person event. What was the biggest challenge in planning an in-person event for the first time in a year and a half after you did all this planning and pivoting to virtual events, thinking in a virtual mindset? What was it like coming back to an in-person mindset?
It was like coming home. It felt really good. Yeah, I really did. I was so excited. I keep saying I felt like a kid in a candy store, first day of school. Like, I just was so excited to jump back in, but there was that whole other layer of health and safety protocol, which the team focused on day in and day out, because we wanted to make sure that every attendee, no matter, everyone's coming in from with a different perspective, that everyone felt comfortable. So we made sure that we abided by all rules, regulations, and then some.
Yeah. Whereas on the other side, I could not remember how to do my job in real life. So there was a lot of learning curve. Like, wait, we did this for how many years? How did we do this again? So a lot of it was just remembering, but dusting off the cobwebs to remember, oh yeah, what's it like to get 200 people to get on a plane? Oh, that's right. That's right.
Or it's like, that's why we created a process for that, because we're going to forget.
Yeah.
Tracy, what was it like for you having to adjust? Because obviously, I know that at this in-person event, like Allison was saying, there were some roadblocks, some health and safety regulations, and you love to be on a first hug basis with people. How did that change?
I don't think it changed very much, honestly, Katie. It was a lot so we wanted with our health and safety protocols was that letting people put a sticker on their badge to say what their level of comfort is, and it was like green for hugs or handshakes, and yellow for maybe elbow bumps, and then red was like, no, I like my distance. So I would say the majority of people were green. So I still got my quota of hugs, and I think people were feeling short on hugs, so I got lots every day. So I did get to fill up my tank of hugs, but it was so good to be back in person and to have people feel comfortable with that. It's just, we had pins that said they were vaccinated. We had people wearing masks or not wearing masks, so it was great just to have everyone actually be in person and be able to reach a level of comfort that worked for them.
And one thing that we did put out there right from the get-go is, just respect everybody, because again, everyone has a different mindset, a different perspective. So just worry about yourself, take care of yourself, and just respect all others.
I do have to ask, knowing that there were some very touch and go moments this summer, even leading right up to the event, was that concerning for you? And what I mean is, obviously the Delta variant came in. Was that at any point like, oh my goodness, this might need to pivot? And did you was there a plan B?
Yeah, we had plan B, C, and D, but we were really hoping that we were going to move forward, with the in-person event. But we had a plan in place if there were a few sponsors that backed out because of travel restrictions or whatnot. We had a way for them to participate without being there. So we created Zoom-enabled boardrooms, which boardrooms is like the crooks, the bread and butter of these events. So we wanted to make sure we could offer that component to sponsors, which a couple of them did take advantage of, and they were grateful and loved that we added that component in.
And as far as attendee feedback to keep in mind, we've still been planning events. You've still been planning events all year. Was there anything that you took from those virtual events, whether it be what worked for both of you in those events or the feedback that you got from them that you needed to directly input and implement into the in-person event that you went to last week? Was it anything that ended up in there from whatever anybody told you, or whatever worked for you from these virtual events, besides the Zoom rooms, as you mentioned, Allison?
I would say it's a lot of the implementation that we did had to do with the content and how we structured sessions to give people enough time to actually warm back up into networking, because some people hadn't really been in person for a long time. And so that there's kind of that delay in networking, of actually, how do I talk to a person in real life without a screen in front of me? So a lot of what we did is we implemented a little bit more time to get people to actually communicate with one another, to talk, and really coming in and actually livening up the room. And luckily, I think energy levels stayed a little higher than we expected. We were afraid people were going to be really worn out. So we kind of spaced things out a little bit. I concerned people would be really tired by the end of the day, but it actually ended up working out where people just kept coming back for more. So I think everyone was just ready for that part. But I think what we really learned in the virtual was having someone in the room to really facilitate the conversation, to really drive people to actually engage. And that really was really helpful when bringing it back in person.
I hadn't
also
even thought
what
about.
Tracy said though about people not being together in such a long time. We host prep calls for both the attendees and for the sponsors, and I want to say it was like the highest turnout that we've had. Those that showed up, and I think people were just like, okay, I need to brush
How do
off.
I
I
do this?
haven't, yeah. How do I network again? What is a boardroom like? So I think the prep calls that we had for both sides really help people prepare.
I hadn't even thought about the energy levels that you mentioned, Tracy, and Allison, you saying that people just needed to brush up on how to relearn a few things again about just being out and behaving in person like that. Did anybody show up in sweatpants by accident? Oh, we're not in my living room.
Not by accident. There were a
Not
few people who,
Not by-
I think there were a few people who had to go buy some clothes. COVID-15 was real for a few people. So you could definitely tell there were some like clothes that, oh wait, let me take off that price tag for you in a couple of instances.
As long as you
That's
do it
funny.
without telling them, just sneak it
Yeah.
off. Be like, let me just snip that. That's funny. As far as now you've had some distance, there's been a little bit of time. You've caught back up on sleep, I hope. Is there anything that you would have done differently at XChange August? Why or why not?
I honestly, coming off of it, I can't think of anything at the moment that I would have done differently. And I think it's the consistent feedback that we're getting from attendees and sponsors that first event coming back in 18 months, they thought it was a home run. And I thought that, but I always wait to hear the feedback because there's always going to be something, that we probably could have done a little bit better. But I think first one out of the gate, everybody brought their A game.
I agree. They're really, honestly, the things that we could change are things that we look at every single event, regardless of whether we're in person or not. It's like, do we use the right tools? Did the things perform that we wanted them to? All in all, everyone really brought their A game. Everyone engaged in the event and checked in at the event and really was invested in being there and participating. And without that, the event is terrible. We see it every time when people aren't fully engaged, it doesn't work out. So everyone was so present that I think that elevated well beyond anything we could look at and go, oh, we should have, brought in snacks sooner.
Right.
Those are the kind of things.
But these are the things we focus on, and we'll do that either way when we have our post-event, debrief. Of course, these are things we focus on, but overall, big picture, it was a success.
And snacks, of course. I mean, if you were just like, should we have more snacks? I say yes. There is never an event where I go, wow, there were too many snacks. Not a thing. And it's funny that you say you want to hear the feedback first because it's hard to judge the event. Nobody wants to call their own baby ugly. And I don't expect that either of you to think of the event as that either. Now, as we move forward, obviously there's still a lot of 2021 left. We obviously have events coming up for that our channel company hosted coming up within this calendar year still. Are there plans for those as far as, did you learn anything from this event that you're going to directly apply to them? Or do you think that they're going to go right back to where we were pre-2020, same events as we expected in 2019? Give me an idea of what's cooking up right now. What are you planning for?
I would say 2021 is an odd year still, Katie. Like we can't go right back to the way things were. And I think a few things will probably stay for a long time to come. But one of the things we're seeing is, with this Delta variant and, Lambda, and who knows what else is going to happen in 2021, because look at what happened in 2020. We had no idea what was coming at us. So I think what we're kind of doing is we're just looking at what we have on our plates. What we learned from the last event is like, we know we need to overcompensate on the number of attendees because we know some people are going to get COVID or be exposed to it and not come to the event because of that, because they're respectful. But we also are looking at, okay, like we need to have backup plans, like multiple backup plans, which we always have. It's just having ones that are easily implemented, someone at the ready to jump on and join us and help us, be successful. So really, I think the rest of the year we're looking at, the events probably will look a little smaller than they used to, and we'll have a little bit more space, and we'll have people wearing masks and some that don't wear masks, and we'll have people, that choose to not engage at certain things because they don't want to be too close to people. But I think we just roll with the punches for the rest of 2021 and see what 2022 brings our way, because we're back in person, and that's step one. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah. And when you look at Women of the Channel, specifically Women of the Channel East, we were on target to have probably over 1,000 women, in a normal year. We are not targeting that. We don't want to target that. 500 would be, more or less the number. So, and I would say the same thing for the West event that's happening in November, Women of the Channel West. half the audience as well. So we're not looking for the big numbers. We want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the number that is expected, and then working with the space, as Tracy just said, making sure that, we are offering the right format for everyone to feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Do you think that virtual events will continue at all? I know that it was exciting to get back to the in-person events, but from speaking to the panel that we had earlier, there's value in virtual events. We had a mom of 2 young kids on. She said it was really easy to be able to put them down for nap time and, go to an event really quickly, go to a virtual networking session, and then go back to mom life and work life. Do you think we could see some of these events continuing virtually, or do you think we'll completely try to transition them back to in-person when we can?
I think there will always be that hybrid component in some aspects, but I think in person is we saw or we felt what we didn't have of being in person and how important it is, that human interaction. So I don't see it coming back like it was for this past year and a half. I've also heard from plenty of, partners, board members, that virtual fatigue is real, and the in-person is needed. So it's going to be a tricky balance on how much is too much with that virtual.
Yeah, I agree. But what we did see and valuable is kind of what she was talking about, is the freedom to be able to jump onto something and know it's happening, or like a peer group. We're now because we missed out on so much. Now we have these peer groups that are running in between events to keep people connected. So I think we're going to still see lots of those. All of the content will be available in a virtual capacity for at least another year is probably my guess, if not longer, or it'll always be a case of we'll put everything out there in some sort of virtual digital capacity so that people can still access it regardless of whether they can come or not, because who knows what the future is going to hold.
And it's an extension of the event. I mean, when Tracy recruits for our events, we recruit a certain number of individuals. And once we hit that number, it's filled. So now having an extension, an on-demand site, whatever virtual piece you want to call it, it allows other individuals to see and get an eye for what happened at an XChange event, an MES event, an XGen event.
I just don't know how you're going to get more snacks in a virtual event. I think that's the one thing I'm struggling
Gift cards. You get gift cards.
I like that idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tracy, Allison, thank you both so much for joining me today to have this discussion. And of course, thank you at home for listening. Get witty with it. We'll be right back after this. This episode of Get Witty with It is brought to you by Cinetech Solutions, enterprise-level support within your reach. Thank you to all my guests today for participating in the podcast, and thank you for listening at home. Get Witty with It is a production of The Channel Company, the parent company of CRN. You can listen to this podcast and our other series on CRN TV, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. I'm Katie Pavoso. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.